Okay, Susie, I'm going to start letting everyone in now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to get going in just a couple of minutes. We're going to give people a little bit of time to join the webinar, but if you could sit tight and keep yourselves on mute, we will be with you shortly. Thank you to everybody who's joining us. We're going to get going in about 1 minute. We're just giving people a little bit of time in case they're late joining us this evening. Okay, so good evening and welcome everybody to what is our 10th Liverpool Leaders event. This series has been running for just about 2 years now, and in that time we've been very honoured to welcome back some really inspirational leaders. We kick-started the series a couple of years ago with an alumnus from the university, James Quincy, who's the CEO and chairman of the Coca-Cola Company, and we've had lots of inspirational leaders who are alumnus of the university since then, including our current Chancellor, the Honourable Judge Wendy Beethlestone, and our current Vice-Chancellor, Professor Tim Jones. You can watch back any of those past events via the link that my colleague Andy is going to share in the chat box. And the chat box is also your place to put your questions to today's guest. And we will answer your questions or put your questions to Hans when we've got through our initial discussion today. And I am delighted today to be joined by Hans Brown. Thank you very much for joining us, Hans. Hans studied a Masters of Engineering, Civil and Structural Engineering at the University of Liverpool, graduating in 1998. He's lived all over the world, but now resides in New York City, and that's where he's joining us from today. Hans Brown is the Chief Information Officer and Head of Technology for Corporate Trust and Depository Receipts at BNY Mellon, America's oldest bank and the very first company to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And I found out just this second a very other exciting fact about BNY Mellon, which is that it was founded by Hamilton of musical fame, ladies and gentlemen. So that was very, very exciting. Hans is managing and supporting a $1.7 billion business with a diverse technology, providing a world-class equity and debt servicing business. He's dedicated to exploring business models of the future and focused on increasing scale to simplify and modernize, automate and improve workflows to deliver increasing straight-through processing and operating leverage. Hans embraces a digital-first mindset that encourages an open, collaborative approach to addressing clients' needs and in the development of new capabilities, product and content that enables the company to be successful. He also inculcates a culture of partnership, promoting engagements with the global fintech community, and maintains a pulse on technology trends and differentiates BNY Mellon's engagement with emerging leaders. Hans brings a strong digital pedigree and a wealth of experience working across continents to enable organizational cultural change and rapidly deliver digital solutions in the financial services, telecoms, and consumer electronics industries. He's a recognized global change agent who's passionate about leading diverse and multi-generational teams while promoting empowerment, development, and true autonomy to enable the workplace of the future. We are so grateful for your time. It's lunchtime for you, Hans, so I'm very grateful that you've sacrificed your lunch break for us. I'm going to start off by asking you a few questions, and then we will hand it over to our audience to see if any of them would like to put questions to you as well. So first one from me, why did you decide to study at the University of Liverpool? An excellent decision. And are you still in touch with anybody from your time at Liverpool?
So firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's great to actually, to kind of be doing this. And I was thinking ahead of our session here, this would have been the kind of thing that would have been great for me when I was studying. So why did I choose Liverpool? And I'll say there's a combination of both serendipity and, I make the joke there was no other choice. So my family has a strong heritage in Liverpool. My great-grandfather ran a pub in the Dingle. I'm a true red, always have been. And irrespective of where we were, there was only ever going to be one decision as to where I was going to spend the most formative, the most formative part of my life. So I remember being in West Africa, in Ghana, where I grew up. I also grew up and making decisions as to where to go to university. And yeah, I remember even at that young age, I remember thinking there's a choice of more than one versus here's where you're going to go. And, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. And in terms of kind of keep in touch, I do keep in touch with some of my old classmates, and we all kind of spread all around the world. So I have a friend of mine we went to university together. He was obviously in the electrical engineering building right opposite. And he ended up being the best man at my wedding. He now lives in Australia with his family. And every time I travel down that neck of the woods, we definitely make time to meet up, as well as some of the other alumni that I meet that are based out in the US. So we try to keep in touch. It's harder than it used to. It's easier now, but it's definitely something that I try to do more of rather than less.
Brilliant. And you were telling me you grew up in lots of different places around the world. Did that have any influence on your decision to come to Liverpool? We're a pretty global city, and interested to know.
Yeah, and look, and the thing I always say, so we grew up, I grew up, my father was a Peace Corps and then spent a huge chunk of his working life in Ghana. And so a lot of the time, a lot of the people we were around were, in effect, it was a very multicultural upbringing that we had. And one of the things is whenever we came back to Liverpool, I always felt at home because there was always somebody or something that related to me. I still remember, when we first came to Liverpool, and when my first time we came to Liverpool, it was around it was around the time that the Caribbean Festival was held, and it was great. The same sounds, the same music, and it was then that I kind of traced the lineage back from some of the things I'd seen in Ghana and to how that ended up in Liverpool, and then from there it ended in the West Indies, and then obviously came back. So it felt home really, really early on, and it's one of the things that places that you go visit and they're places you go see, and whenever you come back, the place calls you home. Liverpool's one of those places. Every time I come back, it calls me home. And it does help that, I still have had the best fish and chips I've ever had in the whole world. I don't mind what anybody says. I've been everywhere. I've lived everywhere. And I feel I'm eminently qualified to say I have had the best fish and chips I've ever had down on Heath Road and border between Alton and Garston. Just the best chips ever.
Okay,
And
that's
I
a top tip.
still haven't found anything better in any country, in any continent I've ever been to. Nothing better.
Okay, I want the details of that chippy because I haven't been there, and that sounds like a good recommendation. What do you think is the most important aspects of your time while you were with us at Liverpool that have perhaps gone on to help shape you as a leader?
This was actually, so I would say I grew up all over the world, but I grew up in Liverpool. And I think it took me until my second year to actually understand why I was there in the first place. So kind of learning to balance everything. So I went to boarding school. So living away from home wasn't new. I went to boarding school in a different country. So being far from my parents wasn't new. But I don't think I actually grew up properly until that balance, that level of self-sufficiency, and dealing with people who it was their first time. And it was, the responsibility was on me. There's nobody else. There's nobody, whose fault it would be. It was just all me. So I kind of think Liverpool made me grow up. And, probably the reason I took the master's, the MEng degrees, it probably took an extra year on top of what everybody else took. So the first year was a bit of a washout. Second year, kind of started to really properly grow up. And it taught me not to be afraid of hard work. So a lot of what we did in the engineering degree was hard. Like, it was hard work. But getting used to knuckling down and doing the hard work, and the practical applications, the field trips to Chester, the applying that, and then basically linking, here's what I learned in class and here's what it means outside. And it's all you. There's nobody else. It's all you. There's nobody comes in and says, here's prep time, you got to do this. It really shaped how I've approached both leadership now and also just how I approach my career. And so one of the things I frequently say to the teams that I work with is, you got to work hard at the hard work. And I'll say I learned that in Liverpool at the course that I was doing, because it was hard. And there's a lot of hard work. And, I'll be very honest, every time I came back to Liverpool, the accent threw me right at the start, because I've used to one. Then I'd come in and the Scouse accent would throw me. And I still remember thinking, okay, at some point, somebody's going to speak English and I'm going to get it. Then you'd kind of settle into think, then I'll travel somewhere and they'd be looking at me and saying, hey, why can't you speak English for the change? And that dynamism was great. It shaped me in a really large way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love that, the hard work. I always end up getting some amazing sound bites from these conversations. That's already early on in our discussion. That's a great one. So thank you. Can you tell us, and just for the benefit of the audience, I've noticed a few chats in the chat box. I'll have a few questions with Hans, and then we'll absolutely get a chance to ask your questions to Hans. So please do keep those rolling into the chat box and we will get to them, I promise. Can you tell us a little bit about your career immediately after graduation, please, Hans?
Sure. So, and this is my granddad was an engineer. My dad is an engineer. And as with most things, it was precluded that I probably would be an engineer. The fact that I loved it had no bearing on the whole thing, but it's like, so I graduated, and in my last year of graduation, we had, there's the Soil Mechanics Prize that was sponsored by Bachy Solitanche, French company. And one of the things from winning that prize is they offered me a job. And so I took the job, and it wasn't, it was before we graduated. So I took the job and I went up to the Dynamic Earth project in Edinburgh. And it was then that I realized, I made one of the most telling revelations that I've ever had, which is, I do not operate well in really cold, muddy conditions with rain going sideways and the temperature around -2. There are many operating temperatures I operate in at that level of cold. Apparently, I'm not at my best. So I was standing in this site and I'm wet. Everything's wet. I'm freezing. And I suddenly thought, I'm going to be doing this on the M6 for the rest of my life. This is just really, you know what? Some people like this. This may not be me. And at the same time, one of our professors, obviously, professors got us really at my dissertation topic was on non-destructive testing of concrete cores using impact echo analysis. And a lot of that happened in a nice, warm place with, this beautiful sound of humming computer. So immediately after that, immediately after I graduated, I started looking for roles that, had a more of a technology slant to them. And I landed a role with ESAMS in Camberley. And this was, it was a company that was aligned to GC Marconi, GC at the time, that later became GC Marconi. And what I'll say is I had an absolute amazing time with them. I joined them as a developer, as in effect, a software developer. They taught me how to code. Not that I didn't know how to code, but they taught me really how to code. They gave me responsibility to lead teams relatively early on. And then from there, I kind of, my career kind of really took off from there. But it was that real pivotal point in terms of being able to take an education that was as varied as I got in Liverpool and play it into a totally different field from where I started. But there's such a large amount of transferable skills that I learned that I quickly not only settled into the role in ESAMS, I quickly became, I quickly was able to take a leadership role within that organization and then kind of keep on going ever since. So after ESAMS then got reformed into a much smaller entity called Marconi Software Solutions, which is a really software-based company. And I was pretty fortunate to be identified as one of their early leadership cohorts and given responsibility to, it was my first P&L role to actually run a $2 million business for them, which was a really huge thing at the time. I remember being 25 and thinking, oh my God, don't mess this one up now, because there's, the potential to mess it up is far, far greater. And then, and then stayed with Marconi for a while and then left to go and work for Canon Research Europe. And again, totally different domain, but transferable skills that took over with me. And then from there, I left to go and work for a company in the city that provided data solutions to financial services. And then from there to join BNY Mellon. So it was kind of very potted, lots of different industries, no same industry twice. But I'll say the transferable skills from the engineering degree and the fact that everybody, Liverpool as a city gives you a DNA of always being a little bit entrepreneurial, a little bit edgy, a little bit of pushing the envelope. That served me really well because that kind of stayed with me my whole career.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And I'm sure there's people on the call who, like me, got a little nervous flutter at, I'm probably a similar vintage to you, but a £2 million P&L made me nervous at my age, Hans, let alone 25.
Oh. Yep. And I didn't mess it up. The good news,
well, exactly.
The good news is you didn't mess it up.
Clearly not. It's clearly worked out well for you. So you've worked in several different countries around the world. I'd be really interested to understand sort of how you adapt your working styles to different countries, and also if you've got a favorite country that you've ever worked in.
So see, favorite countries I'm not allowed to pick anymore. That's so in BNY Mellon, I'm a member of the 3-continent club. So within BNY Mellon, I've worked in 3 continents. I'm really trying hard to see if they could open up somewhere, somewhere in Antarctica or something, and I could basically just get the set, but we'll get there. And outside of that, obviously worked in West Africa as well. But the one thing I'll say is, and this maybe is more reflection of the multicultural nature of Liverpool, you take everywhere for what it is, not for where you want it to be. So one of the things that I've been really militant about is I don't want I don't want to recreate what I had in where I am. I want to be able to. So I always get a little bit frustrated when, I travel or we move to a different country. And I make the joke, every nationality tries to recreate their country in where they are. And then they miss out on everything the place that they are has to offer. So, one of the things I've tried to do is, be a real Scouser about it, which is take the place for what it is. It is this, you're part of it. You're not kind of trying to change it. You're not trying to upset the apple cart. You're not trying to bring in, I'm not trying to bring England into Singapore. I'm going to actually enjoy Singapore. If I wanted to live in England, I'd have lived in England. But because I don't live in England, I'm living in Singapore, I might as well enjoy it while it's there. So it's just really appreciate everywhere for where it is, and then just really get involved with, what people eat, where they go, what they see, and also take a lot more. One of the things I'll say is you take a lot more time listening to different perspectives than you do telling your perspective. And I always say everybody's a work in progress, me more than most, but it's, being able to take the time to really enjoy a location, a city, a country, a culture that's very different from yours, and then assimilating all of it in is, it's great. So, and I'll give you a segue, which makes me, every time I say this, my kids are going to watch this one day and say, Dad, you embarrass me. So my daughter was born in the UK. So to put into context, my wife is French Moroccan. I'm Ghanaian English. My grandparents were Irish. And my daughter was born in the UK. My son was born in Singapore. And they both speak English, French, and Mandarin. And our house is just an absolute model, because the joke we have in my house is my daughter feels more English and French. My son feels more Chinese and Singaporean. And my wife and I are both confused. And that's kind of like, that's the beauty of living around the place. It makes life great. It makes everything a little bit richer.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And you're not going to be drawn on your favorite country, I can tell, so I will move on.
No, 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 no. They're all like my children. Every one of them's my favorite. The one I'm dealing with right now is my favorite up until I'm dealing with the next one. So yes, they're all my favorite.
That's a great answer. How do you continually drive high standards and also make what must be some really big decisions at your organization? How do you go about that?
So I'm never satisfied. I think you should never be content with the status quo. And I'll say this from an engineering perspective. There's no system that's working well that can't be made to work better. There's no thing that you've got that can't be improved. Everything's got potential upside. And if evolution and everything we know tells us there is always an upside, there's always more to be had. So that just relentlessness in terms of, hey, what is there that we're missing? What is it that I can be more curious about? What have I seen somebody else do that can apply to where I am? What's an associated piece that can come in? So if you look at the evolution, if I think about it, telecoms companies were using large databases to run home location registers for people's phone numbers before banks were. Now, banks are using large databases to make decisions around credit and so on and so forth. But hey, guess what? Autonomous cars are using even larger databases to basically pick it. So the whole idea is there's always something new you can learn from another organization, another industry, something else. So that relentless curiosity is what kind of always, at least, kind of pushes me going forward. And with respect to making the hard decisions, I kind of think it's not that hard. It's, you kind of oscillate around what your principles are and where the company you're working for, what their principles and identity are. I've never worked for a company that their identity, their sense of culture, their values don't match my own. That's pretty important to me. I want to make sure that wherever I'm working or wherever I am, I can be who I am. I don't need to be somebody else, because let's face it, it's a full-time job being yourself. You can't add another job trying to be somebody else at the same time. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is just kind of evaluating decisions in terms of what information is available now for you to make that decision, and never letting perfect choose over good. And sometimes you don't have all the information, and you've got to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, based on what I know now, this is the best call. This is the rationale why, and this is the instrumentation we're going to need to basically put in place to make sure that if it isn't, here's how quickly we can find out, and then put the reverse gears on or change track or do something different. Then the other part is just being really open and building a super strong team around you. So I'm really lucky. I've had a super strong team that I've worked with, and some are new, some I've worked with for a long time, and they challenge all of the time. My staff meetings are tough because there's no respect for hierarchy. Everybody kind of, gets stuck in, and, they challenge the idea, and we pressure test everything. And at the end of it, the best idea wins, not the loudest idea, not the person with the most stringent, not the best orator. It's just, what's the best idea that wins? And ultimately, as a leader, your job is to take accountability and to serve the team. So one of the things I look at, I'm a real believer in servant leadership. And one of the things I look at is, how does this serve the team? How does this serve the customer? How does this serve our clients, our shareholders? And how does it give back to the community which I'm a part of? And if you do that, kind of sleep at night, and then you've instrumented enough to figure out if you got it right all the time. And you won't, but you just got to own it when it's not.
Thank you so much. There's so much in there. I've written about 6 bullet points now, which I'll kind of perhaps reflect on at the end of our discussion, but absolutely fantastic. Thank you. What's been the highlight of your career so far, Hans?
And every time I get asked this, it's the next thing. So, and it's always something that's great. It's always something, it was the move, then it was, hey, the new role, then it was so what I'll say is, as opposed to picking one, I maybe cheat a little bit. The highlight for me has been just the continual amount of change that I've had the opportunity to be part of. So right now, our company is going through another series of changes, and I've been given an additional piece of responsibility to look after, which is great, and it's something new. It's change that I wouldn't have had, and I make the joke, you just settle into one thing and then something else comes along. It's like buses, but it's brilliant. So just the amount of change, I think having the opportunity to go through that for me is the real highlight. And yeah, I love making things better. I love growing teams. I love building cultures that actually perform. I like it when things just keep getting better. I live on the challenge that comes in and just getting things done. You want to continuously do more for the clients that you kind of work with. You want the company that you want in to run like a well-oiled, machine. And you want people to want to come to do work here because it's fun, because they get a sense of fulfillment. They're aligned with the mission that you're interested in. So yeah, all of that, they bundle together as highlight. I think one highlight, yeah, that's a bit hard because if I said that now, then I'll basically leave this meeting, something else will happen tomorrow. And I'll be like, no, it's this one. But it's just, I'd say the amount of change and the ability to move between countries has been brilliant. Moving between countries, working for this organization has been really brilliant.
So somebody who obviously likes challenge in a way and uses that to kind of fire you up to get things done, I'm sensing. But I'm interested in challenges, and I am going to ask you a little bit now about whether you faced any specific challenges being one of the few Black people at a senior level in your industry.
Oh, so I make the joke every time I go into most meetings, I look and, the thing I always look at is this representative of where I live? Or if I'm going to meet a client, is it representative where the client is? And I kind of look in life, you've got two choices. You can either kind of rail against something, or you can say, how do I lean in and help? So one of the things I've been very vocal about is leaning into help on a personal level. How do I lean into help? How do I basically join into schools and organizations that are set up to basically help disadvantaged people get access to education? How do I basically lean in and help and teach and share what I've learned? And it's all about leaning in. And the part that I meant right up front is always being an organization that allows you to be who you are and to be authentic. And it's not easy, and there've been times where, yeah, it feels pretty alone, but being in any organization that allows you to be who you are, to be your 100% authentic self without filters, without, don't go in there kind of being an idiot, but just be your authentic self. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it is challenging. And I'd kind of say you give more to organizations that allow you to be who you are and understand where you're coming from. And in return, your role, but because you can do that, organizations like that tend to be more successful, which then in turn attracts more people. And so one of the things I look at within my own org is, yeah, we've got a lot greater sense of belonging within our organization than we did before. And if I look at just, we have the best people and we have the best organization. And hey, look, scary thing is, the best organization, the best people, everybody looks different. Everybody is different. Everybody comes with a different perspective, and that's what makes it great.
And what do you see as the biggest opportunity for your industry in the next 5 years?
It's actually really, and I think the evolution of new technologies that are coming through present an interesting opportunity and an interesting inflection point in terms of what's possible. I also think there's going to be a larger growth in different asset classes over and above the traditional asset classes that we've got at the moment now. And as people search for greater and greater returns on their investments, they're going to need, a level of sophistication and a level of support that probably they haven't had previously in the past. And then if I kind of think about the shifting demographics of what we've got globally, I think that's also going to be, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, everything's going to be paid for. There's got to be returns that support all of that. And organizations that are positioned to deliver that level of support is going to be, going to be important. The other part I'll say is there's an element of who you're going to trust. So one of the opportunities I actually think is a little bit more intangible is which organizations are you going to trust to be there for you in the midst of the uncertainty? Because with greater uncertainty, I think, you need more trust, not less when it's uncertain. Do you have my back? If things get going, are you going to be the person who's going to be there to hold, are you going to be there to have my back and we can do this together? And so I think that intangible, in terms of greatest opportunities, organizations that are built on a foundation of trust, that other organizations can turn to as a safe harbor in times of stress, in times of turbulence. That, for me, even more than the technology, is going to probably be the greatest point, the greatest size of opportunity that's going to be there. Trust is important, and if you look at the background, the bank, and I think you mentioned it right at the start, Susie, is BNY Mellon's 240 years old this year. And the thing that really surprised me when I kind of thought about it is the bank was founded by Alexander Hamilton, who was one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. And you kind of think it has persisted continuously since then. And you think of how many wars, you think of how many countries have formed, unformed, changed, and so on. And the reason that is because clients and companies and countries and central banks trust us. And so that having that level of trust and being able to do everything we can do to maintain it, super important.
Fantastic, thank you. Last two questions from me, and then I am going to hand it over to audience questions. But this series is called Liverpool Leaders, and leadership is difficult. And I think you only appreciate how hard it is once you reach a leadership position. Can you tell us what you think is the most challenging aspect of leadership, how you manage that, and perhaps what you think might be surprising for aspiring young leaders to know about leadership and its challenges?
So let me start off with the easy one. And that's the last one. What might be surprising? Leadership is super hard and your leaders don't know everything. So if you think the leader knows it all, then no. Then we're just kind of definitely not. And it is hard. And I'll tell you, the thing I struggle with the most, I think still I struggle with it all the time, and is the feeling of, are you doing enough? Do you know enough? And, it's being given lots of names all the way through, but, and I like the categorization that they kind of put it in terms of at every stage as you go through, there is a level of imposter syndrome that you feel, and that's hard. And you can respond to it in lots of different ways. And so as a leader, one of the things I'm always pushing, myself to deal with is, hey, am I being as open as I could be? Am I basically showing the right level of vulnerability that makes me accessible? Am I basically parking my ego in at the door that basically allows me to get insights from lots of different people? And am I stepping in and being a true servant leader to the team by taking accountability when things go wrong, by giving them the praise when things go right? And one of the things that, that all of those things are hard, and you don't kind of come out fully formed knowing it. They come up with tidbits that you meet. It's being able to sit and watch other leaders work and being able to pick off how they work. So, I've been pretty lucky that I've had the opportunity to be mentored and watch incredible leaders go about their day. One of the best leaders that I basically, he had the saying, and it was incredible. He said, look, my job is to kick up and hug downwards. So anybody who's above me, my job's kicking them up. It's like, that's where the pain goes. But downwards, I hug my team. I'm their protector. I'm the person. And it was an incredible way of looking at it in terms of this person wasn't managing up. This person wasn't schmoozing out, basically throwing his team under the bus. He actively had a sense of servant leadership and stewardship to his team. All they wanted all the time was to basically look towards making the team successful. And I've had female leaders that have done the same thing, but even in a totally different way, just in terms of how they engendered a sense of belonging, how they drove for excellence, and how they were able to nudge and squeeze the best out of everything without ever seeming, and one of the female leaders I've worked for, she does everything. It just looks so effortless. And I keep thinking, wow, wouldn't it have been incredible if just, it's like effortless. It's like it's just no effort. Always knows the right question. Always knows that it's effortless. And she's been an incredible leader for me to just watch and learn from. So I would say the hardest bits are dealing with you. The second hardest bits are dealing with your thoughts about you, and then being able to access places and teams and support networks that basically A, keep you in check, or B, tell you you're doing okay. There's not, that you're doing okay and it doesn't. And then the other part is, once you do that, is surrounding yourself with people who challenge and push you. And I spend a lot of time making sure I'm surrounded by people who challenge and push me all the time. The harder the push, the better I come as a person, the better they are. And then together we rise. So, all of those things kind of, bundled together. That's, that for me is the messiness of leadership. It's never linear. It's never straight. It's messy, and it's a people business. But if you kind of really focused on, how do I do the right thing? How do I do that thing right? How do I work harder than hard work? How do I serve my team? How do I elevate them? How do I I don't need to know the answers, but by God, I need to know all the questions to ask. So knowing more of the questions allows me to get the best out of my team.
Brilliant.
Long-winded answer, but
it's fantastic. There's so much in there. I mean, honestly, I'm enjoying this conversation so much, Sean, so thank you. Final one from me. What advice, we might have some younger people on the call, I hope so. What advice would you give to your younger self in university?
Okay, save up for Wednesday nights. I don't know if Wednesday night is still student union night, but definitely, the pound of drink at the student union, save up for that. I was always broke. So first piece of advice. But no, I think the thing if I kind of look back, the thing, and I may be dating too, the thing I wish I'd done more of when I was in university was taking everything that was available. I think I didn't do as good a job in taking everything that was available, i.e. spending more time in taking in lots of different experiences, whether it's with the groups, with the clubs, just taking in the breadth of what's available and giving myself the grace and time to do all of that. The other thing is just being a little bit more intentional with how I spent my time there. And I kind of feel as you look back and there's things, there's a lot that I missed. There's a lot that I gained, but there's a lot I missed too. And it's just being intentional with that. And the other one is I probably tell myself, don't stress so much. You don't have to have it all figured out. It's kind of, you'll amble into some of it, you'll bounce into, but just focus on building those foundational tools that you're going to need, whether that's interpersonal skills, whether that's the ability to decompose problems, whether that's logical thinking, whether that's just, good old Scouse common sense. It's just focus on those things and then invest more time in those as opposed to stressing out. Look, I'll tell a story. When I was in my third year, I applied for internships or summer jobs. This is Windows had come out, they had mail merge and all of those things. So for the first time in ages, I was able to send a lot of email, a lot of letters. I sent out 102 applications to 102 construction companies in the UK looking for a summer job. I got 104 rejections.
How is
Okay,
that
now how do I get 102 things out and 104? Two companies saw it fit to tell me, we really don't like you. They said it once, and in case I didn't hear it, they said it again, just so that I would really know. And I kept all of the letters. I kid you not, I kept all of them. I was like, Jesus. And I still remember, I'm in where we lived, up by Hall Lane, just on top of the hospital. And every day, 4 or 5 letters would come in. I'm like, yep, I'm in. You open, no, 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 no. And now, I was talking to one of the younger people who works for me, and they're going, "Oh, and Tim," I was like, "This is what it feels like when everybody's swiping left. Every time they see you, they're just swiping. No, 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 no." But it's character building. You kind of think it's the companies that rejected me twice, I keep a special place in my heart for them. They shall remain nameless to protect the innocent. But yeah, I stressed out about it,
Of course.
thinking that was an indicator that I was totally unemployable. I wasn't going to be right. I was going to have a failure of a career and so on. And clearly that didn't happen. But I took it pretty seriously at the time. So one of the things I say is just don't take stuff overly seriously at that point in your career, at that point in your life, because there's more to it than that.
Amazing advice, and well done. I mean, I say again, I think you're someone who just bounces back from the challenge. So 104 rejections, and you're like, no, that is not going to
It
stop me.
hurts.
I'm going to
I kid
keep
you
going.
not.
I bet it
I was getting
did.
like about 5 or 6 or 8 a day. And you're like, one of these has to be a yes, just one.
Oh, well, it's
And they were
not done
all
you
no.
wrong. Thank you so much. That's been a brilliant conversation. I am going to hand over to my fantastic colleague, Andy. Andy's going to put some of the, we've had loads and loads of questions. So I'm sorry, guys, we've talked for too long. We won't get through all of your questions, but Andy will do his very best. And Hans, thanks again.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, what an inspirational talk so far. Thank you so much, Hans. I will try and get through as many questions as I can. Thank you for sending your questions in. So the first one is from Laura, and Laura asks, what is your best advice for leading a team? And importantly, did you go to the RAS during your time at university, Hans?
No comment to the second question. And there is no video evidence to prove otherwise. And then to the first question, yeah, that's the time period. The best advice, don't try and be the smartest person in the room. You don't need to know all the answers. Leading the team 9 out of 10 means asking the questions and being the person who can ask the questions. And look, and don't be afraid of asking the stupid questions that everybody actually really wants to know, but nobody's going to ask. So real sign of courage and leadership is asking the right questions and not putting yourself under pressure to know all of the answers. Subject matter expertise does matter. And if you're the subject matter expert in that area, by all means, it's fine to know the answers, but you don't have to know every single answer to every single question that could come out. And that doesn't make you a bad leader.
That's great. Thanks, Hans. Our next question is from Francis, who says, as technology is now becoming the key driver of economic growth, suppose you're a newly hired IT manager, CIO, or CTO, what can be the first things that you do in that company?
So the foundation on all of this is good data hygiene. So there's an old Yorkshire saying, where there's muck, there's brass, right? So clean up your data infrastructure. Because as with everything, if you put rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. So as a new technology, as a new CIO, one of the very first things is, how do you design resiliency into your business? If something breaks, what's there to pick it up? How reliable is your infrastructure? How good is your data architecture and your data infrastructure that basically allows you to make the best of these new tools? The analogy I try to tell my team is there's no point having the greatest stereo in the world if you're listening to it on 50p headphones. Okay, just because the stereo is producing it in great villa, if your headphones are 50p headphones, they're gonna sound crap, irrespective of how good it is. So just make sure the foundations that underpin the enterprise are in a place that allow you to get the best out of these new tools that are there.
Well, thank you, Hans. Next question from Stephen, who says, hello, Hans. Having lived around the world, how do you think Liverpool is viewed as a city or a brand? Is there good awareness and recognition, and what can we do to grow that?
The greatest city on the planet, and sometimes I refer to as the Metropolitan Republic of Liverpool, the independent Metropolitan Republic of Liverpool, home of the greatest football team on the planet without any shred. So I will say I have been everywhere I've been, everybody knows the greatest football team. And for all of those of you who are unaware, it is the Reds, is the red half of Liverpool. And I apologize to the rest of my family who may be listening to this. It's not their fault. I'm blaming their upbringing. So it's the brand in terms of Liverpool, what it stands for. People know the things that we're famous about. Now, one of the things I'll say is we need to be maybe more famous about things that are new, not on things that are, people know the Beatles were born. The Beatles came from Liverpool. That's our history. And people know about the football clubs. It's more what makes us new. You know, very few people know that we have one of the best schools of tropical medicine. It's just, there's lots to be proud of, and I'd say we're viewed well, but I would love us to be known for more than the Beatles and our football club.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Next question from Jingle, who says, recently I am in the module of corporate citizenship. Do you think being ethical and making ethical decisions are important as a leader?
Yes. I mean, it's not an and, it's a yes. So one of the things that and from the time in Singapore, if you're interested in this, one of the things that in Singapore, the Singapore Monetary Authority basically published when I lived out there, they published a seminal paper on fairness, ethics, accountability, and trust in the use of AI. And the whole idea behind it is, how do you basically, in a world that is really dominated by AI and so on, how do you produce that level of fairness, ethics, accountability, and trust and explainability in the tooling that's being. And if we need to do that for things such as AI, we definitely need to do it for humans. So look, it's not hard actually, it is super hard doing the right thing. But it's also the best thing to do is to do the right thing. Doing the easy wrong thing is the worst thing you could ever do, because they'll always catch you back. And this is one of the things, if I kind of think about things that I live by, it's just work hard at the hard work. And sometimes making the right decision is hard, but it still doesn't stop it being the right decision.
Advice in there, thank you. Next question from Cantera, who says, what's the difference between working culture in the UK and US? And how did you make yourself get along with the new culture?
So I had a step of Singapore between, which helped. So what I'll say is, and I kind of maybe bifurcate it, I think there is no singular UK. So if by UK culture we mean what happens in the City of London, that's very different to how work was when I was in Liverpool. And so what I'll say, and in New York is again very different from how work is and maybe in Florida or Chicago or LA or so. What I will say is, in all of them, what's different is the approach to get to the result and the amount of human contact that you need in order to be able to get there. I think there's some countries I've worked in which are a lot more, let's say, it's transactional. Hey, let's go do this. Here's the 17 things, we go and get it done and it's over. I worked for a French company, and they were more like, hey, let's get to know you first. We'll see if I want to go do this with you versus I don't. So I think, and again, it's not so much as different. And given the interpolation of companies that operate on both sides of the Atlantic and so on, I think there's more common than there's not. It's just how you get the work done is a little bit different. So in terms of, one of the things that I used to enjoy in London is everybody used to go out on a Friday for a drink afterwards. Don't do that here that much. So most people live quite far from the city. So everybody's racing to get home as soon as, they're done for the day, and that's it. People start a lot earlier here. So in Asia, people start a lot later. In the US, people start a lot earlier. Waking up at 5 a.m., something I probably wouldn't have done in London. But I definitely do that here now because we start earlier. So I think it's just a little bit of a difference by virtue of how the geography of the place is kind of stuck in. I don't train in the morning. So that whole communal thing where you get your train, it's not like it's your seat, but really it is your seat. And, you've got the people you've traveled to town with on the train every day for the last year. They're not your friends, but they're really your friends. You don't get that because most of the time you drive in and you're on your own. So it's just different.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Our next question is another one from Francis. Thanks for your questions, Francis. Francis says he's worked in 2 companies and has also heard from other people discussing that managers or leaders have their right-hand person who they know is a good man or a woman who they trust for a lot of things, and telling the trust about something. Do you think this is good or not? What benefit or challenge can this bring to you as a leader?
So it's human nature to have go-to people. And personally, I'm not a fan of it. I'm just really honest. I'm not, because just like you don't know everything, your go-to person doesn't know everything. But then there's also an element of, do I trust somebody to have the expertise and the wherewithal to take something and run with it? So one of the things that I generally tend to do is it's not so much as your right-hand person and this person's the person you give everything to. It's how do you build enough people within your circle that everybody can take something and run with it. So one of the metrics I try to use for my team is how many people can I dole out something to and they can run with it unsupervised? Because there's no point in moving the bottleneck from me to somebody else, because that just moves the bottleneck further down. So I'm not a believer in small cliques, never have done. Maybe it's because I was never in a clique, but hey, but I just don't like cliques. So that means the more people you have that are able to take something and run with it and make judicious decisions as they do it, the better it is for the company, the better it is for you. And if you have that, then you have more time to think on strategy and how you're going to execute that strategy versus all the time being lost in the weeds. So generally, as a rule, never had, here's my 1, 2, 3. No, more is better.
Great, thank you, Hans. Next question is from Jane, who says, how have you successfully mastered all these transitions? You sound like a natural leader. Apart from the transferable knowledge you've gained at Liverpool, what else are the most important factors in your success?
Don't take yourself too seriously. I think a lot of the time, the worst thing you can do is take yourself too seriously and not take feedback well. So I kind of found I correlate the ability to take feedback is directly related to how seriously you take yourself. If you take yourself overly seriously, nothing you do could ever be wrong. Everything you do must be 100% perfect. You're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And how dare somebody tell you what you did was less than optimum? So it's not, I actually think it's being able to take feedback from people around you, soliciting constantly, and then making a decision based on that feedback. So one of the things I'm a real fan of is like, it's everywhere. I kind of stick it on lots of things is I welcome feedback. After most of my one-to-one direct meetings, I'll ask them, what could I be doing better? Because how am I going to know if I don't ask? How am I going to? And if I listen to them and they tell me how I could do better, guess what? I am going to get better. So I don't think anybody's born say, hey, look, you're a born leader. It's just, do you take feedback and do you act on it? Or do you take feedback to prove why the other person's wrong? Feedback's the same. The response to it's what's a little bit off. So I kind of, it's taken everybody's a work in progress. And I said at the start, me more than most. And it's really important to take feedback constantly and act on it. And if you hear, another piece of advice I got given by a great person that is there's only one response to feedback. And that is thank you. End of story. Don't explain why, if you find yourself why, no, just thank you. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Hans. I'm just kind of catching up with the messages, and I've got to the point I think where you mentioned your 104 rejections, and there's quite a lot of comments on that, so I'm going to scroll through that. And also, lovely to hear from Laura again, who asked a question about the RAS. She actually met her husband in the RAS, so that's a great story. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to leave Leonardo's football question for my last question. The next question is from Liz, who says, thank you. What do you find the most frustrating thing, and how do you handle it?
Oh, my list of frustrating things. I'm just going to try and think, what tops the list? People who analyze things to death without doing the work. Oh my God. If there's anything that gets me going, it's that level of analysis paralysis where you admire the problem, like really admire it. Isn't this problem so beautiful? Isn't this problem so complicated? I've never seen a problem like this before. It's amazing how good this, just do the work. So my number one thing by a large margin is what I would call problem admiration. where people spend so much time admiring the problem, because nothing could be as beautiful as this problem is at the moment, or as handsome as this problem is at the moment, and then not do the work. Nothing gets me worse than that. Just like, oh.
Yeah, that sounds frustrating. Last few questions. I'm trying to get through as many as I can. And thank you again for your questions. It's from Ambrose, who says, if you're a project manager in project transitions, who has recently lost his role due to a shift of role, what's your advice?
Retrain. So I would say a lot of the world is looking at different methodologies in terms of how to deliver things. So, and I'll just basically take the software space, for instance. Lots of people are looking at large-scale agile trains. Lots of people are looking at less methodology in order to be able to do an ability to deliver continuously. So look at associated industries that do things well and find out how they do it and learn what it is that they're doing. So, and I'll say this, I've lost my job. I've changed jobs, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not. But with each one, there's an opportunity to learn something. And if you're in transition, look at what the organizations that are doing what it is you're interested in, how they're doing it, and learn from them. And a lot of this is publicly available. This is what's scary. Almost all of this is not hidden. It's there. You just have to look for it. So what I'd say is, it's a terrible thing to lose. It's a terrible thing to kind of lose your role. But, one door closes, another one opens up. And part of that opening the other door is, what can I learn to make that door even bigger so that I can walk through it, I can just say through it as opposed to just walking through it.
Thanks, Hans. Yeah, and Ambrose, if you need any support with anything, please get in touch with the team. You've got our email address and be happy to help with anything. Last two questions, if I may, Hans. I know it's very close to the end of the time and you've been so generous, so thank you. It's from Davy. Have you had a mentor, and what are the qualities I should be looking for in a mentor?
I've had many mentors, and what I'll say is also have what I call is your personal board of directors. And that personal board of directors is a group of people you can call and who will give you frank, unbiased advice. And as your career moves, people will come in and out of your board. It's no different from a company. Let's say you're a company, you'd have a board you'd answer to, and they'll bring different experiences to you. And so it's kind of searching for that personal board of directors, pretty important. And I've had many mentors, like many, many mentors, and there's something you can learn. And not all my mentors have been more senior than me. I've had people who've been more junior to me mentor me as well, and that's also important. So yes and yes to both, but one of the things that's really helped me a lot is having, what I'd call my own personal board of directors. My wife is a standing member, and she takes her job very seriously. And, it's just making sure that you have that level of challenge and that level to basically push you along.
That's amazing, thank you. Our last audience question, I'm sorry I'm not got a chance for all of them, but this will be our final one from the audience. It's from Badri. How would you keep learning what's new in your field of work while not getting absorbed with performing your daily responsibilities?
So if it's important, it'll get done. If it's important, it gets done. And so what I've always said is, if you don't find time to learn, it's actually not important to you. Call it what it is. Because if it's important, will find time. You will make time to get it done. You'll prioritize it over something else. What I tend to do is I try to read a lot, and I podcast an awful lot. So I drive into work, and I'll tell you, if I'm driving into work, I'll be listening to a podcast, I'll be listening to an ebook, I'll be listening to something. And I have a little bit of a commute on the train once I park, and I'll be taking a proper book, and I'll be reading into that. I do try to go to as many conferences that basically tell me what's up and coming, whether it's directly my industry, but most of the time I look at related industries, because most of the time you'll find out what's in the pulse in your own space. It's looking around the corner in the next space that's a bit missing. So a lot of that is really podcasting, reading, spending time going to conferences and learning from there, and then just being really super curious and having just like random conversations with people as you meet them.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Hans. And I did promise that I'd ask Leonardo's question, which is a football related question and a very important question. And he asks, what is your score prediction for Sunday? And I'd just like to add in as well as a big Liverpool fan, Hans, who would you like to see as the next Liverpool manager? If it was up to you to decide, who would you choose?
Oh Jesus, no. This is a land grenade. This is not just a small landmine. This is a whole grenade. So
Sorry.
score this weekend. You see, I'm just looking at the number of injuries that we've got. I'm not going to jinx it. So I'm going to do one better. I'm going to write it. And I'm going to send it to you, Andy, so that I don't jinx it. Because if I say it here and it jinxes it, that's it. I'll never forgive myself. So I'm going to write it and I'm going to post it to you. But needless to say, I'm expecting to be smiling after the weekend, not crying. I'm expecting to be. And in terms of the manager, look, I couldn't predict Klopp. And I actually think, given where it is, there's enough talent riding around. It feels a bit tough to be the one who follows Klopp, because let's face it, the worst you could do is screw it up from now on. So it's like, it's one of those things where you've got to have somebody who's going to be both as inspirational. I've got no idea who could be, but I do kind of believe so long as they stay true to the ethos of the club, we're going to be fine. But I will write and I will send you, and then we can basically both agree if I was right or not. But I'm not going to jinx it. Last time I did that, I jinxed it and it went the other way and I was very upset.
Yeah, I'm a very superstitious person as well when it comes to sports, so that's fair enough. And with your permission, I'll share your prediction with our attendees afterwards as well, so they can see what your full judgment was.
Yes.
Yeah, having listened to your, Hans, and your inspirational quotes and just the amount of stuff we've covered, I think you'd actually probably make a good Liverpool manager yourself with some of the things you said during this meeting. I think you wouldn't go far wrong with you as the man in charge. So we've run over now, Hans, and that's just because we've got so many amazing subjects. I've written a whole host of quotes here that I'm going to take away myself and use, and I know Susie's the same. I can see her scribbling away there. So yeah, wow, what an amazing session. We've covered so much. That's got to be one of the most inspirational sessions I've been to. So thank you so much, Hans. I know you're a really busy man, so thank you for giving up your time, and we really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone so much for their questions. We've got so many questions, so much positive feedback in the chat, Hans, and hopefully you can see that for yourself. So thank you for everyone for attending wherever you are in the world. I know it's an international audience, so thank you. We've got some more events coming up. We've got our next Liverpool Leaders event, which is very close to confirming for June, so look out for your invites for that. Our next Bringing the World to Liverpool event, which is the sister series to this Liverpool Leaders event series, it's on the 22nd of April, and that's with Julian Frankham, who's based in Dubai. So got lots of inspiring graduates, but Hans, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, and a final thank you for giving up your time. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, everybody. It's really great, and good luck to everybody who's in school, and it's going to get better, I promise.
Thanks, Hans, and thank you, Susie, for hosting too. See you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.